Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Gary Crawford and I'm pleased to be joined by Jen Underwood. So thanks for joining us for our webinar on embracing Excel in an enterprise BI strategy. And Jen, thanks for joining us today too.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
As I said, my name is Gary Crawford. I'm COO at XLCubed. And just to give you a background on XLCubed, we're a UK company established in 2003. We've been Microsoft Gold partners since 2008. We provide business intelligence and reporting client tools, but we take a different approach to that of most BI vendors. And that's specifically around our approach to Excel, which really blends into the session today. Our products extend the Microsoft BI platform, primarily analysis services, but with the release of version 9, we support many additional data sources, as we'll mention later. We have two core products, the Excel edition, which provides a BI-optimized Excel environment for authoring and for power users, and then also XLCubed Web, which caters for governed and scalable deployment of Excel-developed reporting and dashboards to a wider audience. We grew originally from a consultancy engagement at one of the oil majors to provide self-serve reporting for their pricing analysts. So right from the beginning, we've been used to working with some of the largest corporates. So we have over 750 customers globally, and they range from mid-size to Fortune 500. And the solutions themselves range from departmental and tactical to mission-critical enterprise-wide deployments. We have a presence in most verticals, and we're probably strongest overall in financial services and in pharma. In terms of size of customer, really it ranges from anywhere from 5 users to 5,000 users, and among those customers it includes many household names. So having done the brief introduction to XLCubed, the company, I'd like to hand over now to one of the leading experts in the analytics industry, Jen Underwood. Jen, over to you.
Thank you, Gary. My name is Jen Underwood. I have a very popular blog, jenunderwood.com, and also very active on social media with @idigdata. I've been in the space 20 years and absolutely love it. Today we're going to talk about the XLCubed offering, the whole concept of, you're hearing a lot of messages in the market about replacing Excel. I'm going to tell you something a little bit different. I'm going to tell you to embrace it, but to do so responsibly. We'll look at some solutions that XLCubed offers, why Excel users in particular, what makes it unique, beautiful, and different, and also what solution providers can do to help their customers, again, responsibly embrace Excel. So I'm going to open up with that theme of don't replace it, embrace it. And why? Why do I say this? Excel is the #1 most loved analytics tool. Essentially, what you're trying to do when you're trying to change or push someone or whatnot is you're trying to change people, and people don't want to change. So essentially, the whole idea to really get adoption is to understand your audience and to understand what they need and to provide them what they need and to work with that. So one of the top 10, when I do research in the market, the top 4 most wanted self-service BI features always include Excel. So 99% of tech users say Excel export is important, and there's reasons for that, right? There's 94% of business users will say the same thing. So self-service BI apps, the really, really wonderful apps that have come in the market and made things very visually appealing and easy to drag and drop, those solutions, even though you'll hear the marketing messages of replacing Excel, really do not replace Excel. They have different purposes and usage, and the business users will certainly navigate or stay with what they're comfortable with. Now, having said that, you have users that have Excel and they love it, and they're not going to change their ways for the coolest, best thing in the market, whatever's out there, the shiny, exciting thing. What we really do need to be concerned about, though, is there are a lot of truths with needing to have Excel reporting accuracy. We've heard, that was the London whale, since it's a London company. Certainly, folks will understand that story. When we talk about, just numbers or mistakes that can happen, it's an accident, and people are not perfect. Even machines are not perfect. But essentially, you want to try to improve the accuracy, look at complying with any regulatory requirements, maybe audit requirements that you have, being able to go back in time and look at what was that value before our merger, that type of thing. And the pains that most of these groups have are all these versions of Excel that are flying around, trying to put, who has the latest and greatest version, and just the whole concept of how do we easily share and govern this. So there's ways that you can do this. And essentially that's what you should be helping customers do, or that's what you as a customer should be thinking about, not necessarily, oh, we got to replace this. You can have, governed Excel that can exist. So today there are some reporting gaps, and there have been solutions in the market. There's Office 365, there's SharePoint that's been around, there's Power BI that's a newer solution in the Microsoft offering space, and all of those have some Excel capabilities and some nice reporting abilities there. They're still not necessarily optimized for web and mobile. You'll also find that some of these solutions will have limited authoring in pivot tables. And having worked with these users now for 20 years and trying to convince folks that, data discovery, it's the greatest thing ever, my most avid users of Excel, they love pivot tables. So if you're really working with somebody that loves data, that's pivot table rendering, that interactivity, that interlinking between sheets. When they go to the world of some of these other solutions, those things are really missing for them. It's not designed to be a big table, online table reporting tool. It's just not. The other thing that usually is fairly limited in a lot of these tools is write back. And what write back allows folks to do is things like scenarios, if you're doing financial and budgeting, what was my real value, that type of thing, etc. So there's limited ability to really do the write back in some of those what if type scenarios. The other thing that we're missing in a lot of these features, and unfortunately it's really by design to be more viral and to get adoption, there's this trade-off with adoption versus governance. And it's certainly something that I've heartached about when I was in product management, was having the right mix and giving folks the right tools at the same time. You don't want to limit folks, but you also want to make sure that they have success with the solution. And so, providing missing governance features was always a real passion topic of mine. Some of these solutions, if you do find, like SharePoint, for instance, can be really expensive to roll out to everyone. When I used to be in the sales field, it was something like 200,000 was minimum to get myself and the rest of the sales team there to help you with you thinking about purchasing and licensing and all of that. SharePoint was certainly not cheap. And it was also complex. I will honestly tell you that I do not miss my SharePoint setups. I've written about this in the past and I refer them all away. Even configuration in the cloud can get pretty complicated when you start looking at trying to get the authentication pieces, the security pieces, etc. So there really hasn't been a great solution that I've seen out there for Excel and really governing this in the piece today. So when Gary reached out to me and a lot of vendors will do this, they'll reach out to me, they'll show me their solution, they'll talk about it. I'll usually give them a hard time. I'm a little grumbly, I think, as I get older. And I'll ask them, what makes you unique, beautiful, and different? Isn't somebody already doing this today? And I was pretty impressed. Essentially, I literally told them, I've never seen really anything quite like this today. It does add features. There's an add-in aspect to Excel that will be shown later. There's also a server-based version, and there's a lot of enhancements to Excel that make using and reporting Excel not only just the governed side of it, but if you are an Excel fan, a lot of really nice capabilities that, breaking out of pivot tables, or just some of the things you've been frustrated with, they've solved. So they've filled. And this is when I think about a world with big vendors and you still have opportunities for small vendors. This is a wonderful example of a small vendor enhancing a very nice base product with opportunities in an area they were experts in budgeting and finance and performance management, something that Microsoft certainly was not an expert in that particular area. And this group took that expertise and made Excel better. So looking at XLCubed and the conversations that, the review process that I went through in looking at this solution, providing a mission critical environment for Excel reporting. So essentially having things like performance, scale. My big thing with this is looking at security. How are you actually securing these assets? Can I look back at it and see, comments and changes and really be able to roll back versions, that type of thing. A lot of that in a server-based solution is indeed there. And when you start using the server-based Excel sheets hosted in XLCubed, you're avoiding some of those classic reporting pains of whose version is this and where were we at before? Can we roll back? That type of thing. And there's also, again, that flexibility there for if you do have planning and budgeting applications, you do want to do scenario and what if analysis, to really do that at scale with multiple people working on the same sheet, which is again really something that we haven't been able to do before without emailing or putting it into a share and all sorts of other error prone processes, and why the Excel hell per se marketing messages are out there today. From an architecture perspective, for my technical folks on the line, XLCubed shines really brightly with analysis services. We'll certainly show and talk about that in a bit. However, it also works with other databases. You can directly connect, as one of the latest versions, to SQL Server directly, Oracle, HANA, even some of the cloud data sources such as Redshift, Google BigQuery, and so on. There is a report authoring environment, and this is that warm and fuzzy Excel environment that when you talk about, a lot of analytics users, it is their number one tool. That is, why can't I just do this in Excel? I love Excel. This is in Excel. There's an add-in with a lot of really nice extra little functionality in here. And from the governed perspective, when you look at solving those governance, there's a server that can be published to, and you can also easily embed it. So if you do have SharePoint, you can embed it there. Or you do have, I've worked with a lot of folks that brand their one-stop shop for all things portals related. I recently had a session in the Microsoft ecosystem with a group called Perspective ILM. They have a reporting portal that will consolidate all the different reports into one. So XLCubed could be certainly in something like that as well. And then when you look at the delivery perspective, and when I say delivery, people consuming those reports, you have the mobile native apps that allow for the responsive, touch-friendly user experiences. All types of web browsers are supported. And there's also scheduled distribution. And a lot of people think that scheduled distribution, is really the old world. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's always been one of the most popular ways to really distribute reporting, because a lot of times folks will not go to your server. Again, you're changing people. Don't try to change people. Come to where they are. And when you start to push those reports out, they'll consume it. So some key capabilities in here. The managed self-service BI. So it helps users work more effectively in that, whether it's the Microsoft BI platform or even some of the other platforms that we're talking about, using tools that they already love, that's already proven, that's already very, respectably priced, version independent. And that's another thing. Oh my goodness, having been in the Microsoft system for so long, and having supported, well, what version of Excel is it? It has to be this specific of Power Pivot to work with this specific version on your server, and oh, don't publish that, and oh yeah, that's features available, but only in the newest one that my company doesn't have. So a lot of that was very frustrating for a lot of different users. And what's really nice, and I was surprised, I think I even saw Excel 2007 being supported by XLCubed. Gary can correct me in his session.
No,
if
that's
that's not
right.
the, was it? Yeah, Excel
Yeah, yeah.
2007. Wow.
That's as far back as we go, but yeah.
Yeah, you just don't see that. Nobody does that. So that's great. But the reality is there's absolutely customers still out there. Just a few years ago, I went somewhere where they had SQL 6.5 and I thought, are you kidding me? But that's the reality of not everybody is upgrading every year. They can't, they don't. It's not their most, it's just not what they do. So XLCubed lets you to work with all sorts of different versions. It gives the users where they want it, again, where it's the one version of the truth, but in Excel without the pains and limitations of some of the pivot table reporting of the past. The other thing that I liked about it was a light footprint. So a lot of times when I look at these tools, I'm like, well, what do I have to download or what do I have to set up? And the SharePoint days of the past, the projects that I no longer work on are those implementations that would take months to do. So this was pretty quick, lightweight, and the optional SharePoint integration or optional integration to the other pieces made it a bit more compelling. I think the last piece too is just having some consistency. So when you look at, again, where are users comfortable? Where can they just instantly be productive? It's going to be in the favorite tool of choice, Excel. So what makes these guys completely unique is this whole attitude towards embracing Excel. When I look at some of the data discovery tools, there's just so many white papers and whatnot on, it takes me so long, and different blog articles about, oh, it was so painful and this and that. And yes, there's some pains with it. However, there's still, there's probably going to be tons more folks that don't tell you about all the joys they have in Excel, how much they love Excel, how flexible it is. You can do anything pretty much with that crazy thing. It's what we would call the Swiss Army knife of analytics. And you just don't hear, especially when you're in product management, people only call to complain. I very rarely heard good news, and I would tell people, please send the happy grams to the product team, because it's tough, especially when you're on a bleeding edge product to only hear complaints. But Excel's loved. You just don't hear about it much. It really is. So flexible, simple, and some of the other things here is the key partners in this ecosystems are really experts. So a lot of times, again, when you're looking at some of the solutions, they're young folks that are selling this right out of school. They're not experts in BI and analytics. They're not experts in financial planning. Honestly, I'm not either. I'm not an expert in financial and budgeting and planning. In fact, I would probably send them to Gary now that I know that's his area of expertise. So they really know what they're talking about. They understand the regulatory compliance and some of the things that are important when it comes to governing Excel that most groups usually really don't know. And they listen. And I think that's something that's going to be quite interesting as we go from a market that has been very tons and tons of little vendors to now we're seeing a bit of consolidation and a bit of commoditization in some parts. Are these companies going to continue to listen to customers? And what you'll find and what I'm finding are my smaller customers and my smaller vendors incredibly responsive, incredibly great when I talk to and do market research. Just the feedback from real customers is it's so refreshing to not be a number. It's so refreshing to have this group really partner with us to be successful and not send us to a forum or an online help or bot. So this is really something when you start thinking about the customer experience and success that makes these little groups a little bit more appealing. So some of the tools, and Gary will show this, I think a lot of this when you see the demo is going to be far more compelling than me telling you, but essentially, rather than reading this slide, I'm just going to mention a few different areas. It's the whole concept of, time is money, and remove some of these restrictions, again, on the frustrations maybe that users have Excel that still love Excel. Your time savings, and you're going to hear that from most groups, is there's time savings with a lot of these things, or they wouldn't have built a product, quite frankly, because people buy products to save time. It's pretty straightforward, works with lots of the things that you already have. And again, I think a lot of this is going to be just seeing it, but one of the beauties is just the sheer flexibility and enhancements that the demo is going to show you that this slide won't do any justice for. Now the product you're going to be seeing is XLCubed version 9. There's a few key additions that were in that launch per se, and in the Microsoft community, it was announced. If folks went to pass, it was announced last year. And what was key about this release, and XLCubed has certainly been around for a while. They're an experienced, fantastic partner in the Microsoft network. It was just expanding beyond, some of the traditional offerings and really taking their product to a whole nother level. So adding different data sources, putting together a dashboard designer with mobile apps, everything being fully responsive, adding different viewports so now you can incorporate it and consolidate wherever you want this report to be. So why users love XLCubed? I'm going to just do a few highlights, and we do have a white paper on this you can download as well. But essentially what you're going to see, what Gary's going to show, is some flexibility to navigate outside of your pivot tables. This is kind of one example here. I'll show a few pictures that, what I looked at it and said, well, this is beautiful, this is different, this is nice. It is some of this enhanced scoping and dynamic table calculations without having to write MDX or DAX. And I am terrible at DAX. A lot of folks don't realize how complicated some of the multi-dimensional, it's a really different way to think about three-dimensional, it's not even really three-dimensional, it's n-dimensional scopes and processes to get the calculations right. And Excel users don't think that way. So all of a sudden, when you're trying to do something that should be a simple, and I'm showing here, it's simple E8 minus D8 over D8, it's just a simple calculation. In DAX, that would actually be pretty hard. When you start looking at other types of things, it's that first class experience of putting together hierarchies, making it, I have my own groups, or personalizing the data set. Again, having that right back. Usually when you're consuming a cube in a lot of these solutions, you don't have any ability to kind of customize it. It is what it is, and this is what IT has said you can do, and doesn't allow you to do some of these, ability to groups and create named sets, things like, here are my top accounts, or here are my assigned products. Again, without having to use MDX or DAX code that most is out of reach for, I would say, most of the business users out there. There's also the ability to find and use any sort of cell changes dynamically, and that's kind of a cool capability. The demo will help explain what that means. The mobile thing, we've talked about that a bit. XL links. So there's when you talk about some of the gaps that XLCubed voids fills, it's things like being able to link between multi-sheet reports just like you do today, but on the web. That's pretty cool. And that's not something that I've seen really an easy way to do that, if there's a way to do that today. Version control is completely invaluable for Excel-centric reporting, quite frankly, for most reporting. I was really thrilled when I'm seeing a bit more of that happening in the market today, because again, users and customers absolutely need to have this. Some other things that are fun and neat with XLCubed, and it's more from a visual perspective, are things like trellis charts, having small multiples, spark lines, being able to see really quickly in a cell context over time. And that really aligns to when you think about Edward Tufte, Stephen Few, all these data visualization best practices, not just giving me a number, but also providing the context of what does that number mean. And the features within XLCubed are really lovely for that. And they have some really wonderful best practice data visualizations on how to design dashboards if you look at some of their examples. Report level mashups. So being able to easily bring together a cube with maybe a CSV or some Google BigQuery data, and not necessarily having complicated, let's set up a refresh schedule, let's set permissions here on this server in the cloud somewhere. It really gets a lot easier when it's delivered in the UX of Excel. And of course, my whole theme of this webinar, which is the governance, having a lot of different governance features for my admins, for folks that do want to, kind of not completely lock down Excel, but have, some security and permissions around what you can do with it. Enough of me. Let's have Gary show you. I think it's going to help to see some of these things, because seeing the demo sold me and certainly helped me understand what makes XLCubed unique and beautiful.
Okay. Great, thanks very much, Jen. As Jen said, this is going to be a fairly brief demo stage just based on time. We're happy, obviously, to answer any questions at the end, and happy to follow up individually after that where there's interest. So fundamentally, XLCubed aims to provide enough flexibility in data-connected Excel to help people use it as a presentation layer and not as a data mart, because that's where a lot of the pain and the trouble actually comes into play. And also for widespread and governed sharing and distribution of Excel developed reports through XLCubed Web. So as I just mentioned, XLCubed, let's look at the Excel edition first. It's all about data connectivity. So when I look at the list of connections here, the workbook on screen is connected to analysis services. It could be connected to many cubes, many different tabular models, or it could also be connected to other sources such as SQL Server, SAP HANA, Power BI. There's a wide range of sources that we now support. One of the interesting ones, which was added with version 9, was the data mashup capability, which allows us to bring different sources together at report runtime, as Jen was just describing, without the need for a full semantic layer to do that. One of the core building blocks in XLCubed is a grid, and a grid is, at the lowest level, fundamentally similar to a pivot table. This is the initial designer, where you've got columns, you've got rows, and you've got filters. You basically position the hierarchies you want to use on the appropriate axis, and you make your selections within that. And there's additional flexibility on the selections that you don't get in pivot tables. But a lot of the reason really that grids are there is because they do things pivot tables can't, and they fill in the gaps that pivot tables have. So in the example on screen at the moment, you probably noticed there are some spark lines showing monthly trend. And when I drill into the data, the spark lines will grow with the data, and as I slice and dice potentially, I'm going to get now a chart for each of the splits within product. So the whole thing is dynamic, the whole thing is being calculated within the query itself. So there's lots of aspects where XLCubed adds value over and above pivot tables, but I want to really start with two specific ones today in Excel. So the first is calculations, so user calculations. We build calculations into the data model, but you're never going to get all the calcs business users want. And what business users want to do in a big calculation engine called Excel is to be able to use Excel formulas within pivot tables, but you just can't do that, so at least not within data-connected pivot tables. So with XLCubed, I can add a new column calculation. Let's call that growth. And this is going to be the November growth, essentially. So I'll say literally just an Excel formula, November minus October divided by October. And you see that that's come through, the calculation has come through, and when I drill into the data, it propagates that down through. And in exactly the same way as it did with the charts just now, if I start to analyze this by geography and drill into the geography, I'm going to get that calculation for each split within the geography. So you can see for Australia here, the calculation's been repeated, but it's doing the right calculation. So it's really a combination of allowing users the familiarity of Excel, but mixing that with the flexibility of the underlying data source and making everything much more dynamic. These calculations, I would say, they're really not about complexity, they're about accessibility and familiarity. They're what business users understand and they're what they want to use. If you have the need for significantly more complex calculations, we have a little custom calcs dialog where you can do the complex MDX, the complex DAX, and there are some wizards to help you achieve that too. But being able, sometimes it's the simple things, and being able to add calculations into a dynamic grid is an enormously big deal for many of our users. The second aspect then is pivot tables. In some ways, you can see them as isolated islands. They don't know much about the rest of Excel. and they certainly don't know much about each other when you see them overlap, etc., and the nasty error messages there. XLCubed's been designed to integrate very, very tightly with Excel. We can read from a cell, we can write to a cell. And in a world where analysts know the data, in many cases very well, it can be quicker for them to just literally type into a cell and have the report refreshed based on that, rather than to go and find something in a tree, particularly if you're looking maybe at SKUs or something like that further down than Canada is in the hierarchy here. But in this example, I can just reference it to this cell, and then when that cell changes to, let's say, United States, the grid's going to refresh based on the content of that cell. So in this case, it's an exact match. You can also easily set this up so that it's based on a pattern match or essentially a search. So in this case, when I type in road, this is all based around bicycle sales, so this will return road bikes, listing of road bikes down the bottom here, or I can switch it back to touring, and it'll return touring bikes. So we see people struggle quite a lot, actually, with searching, certainly in analysis services, and that type of approach can really help a lot. And the last approach is, we don't limit this to one cell. It can be a range of cells. So if we have a system which is reporting on stock outages or near stock outages, I've got a list of products here about to run out, we may want to see recent sales based on those products. So to do that, again, same process. I can go into the selector for product, and I can simply reference that range. I'll reference a larger range for now. But the grid will refresh based on that instantly, and then if the range itself changes, let's say more products come in or some disappear, I can just copy, paste some items in here, and the grid will pick that up straight away. So again, enormous time saver depending on the application, but if you imagine how fast that was compared to looking at 15, 20 products, however good your search is, that approach is going to win every time. So XLCubed, as I say, integrates tightly in terms of reading from a cell, but also in terms of being able to write to a cell. And the two together gives us a very powerful capability to build interlinked and chain of thought-driven reporting in a way that end users, business end users, can actually pick up and run with. So in this example, we have a KPI table at the top left, looking at revenues, margins, and we have a variance based on previous period. So if we see that the margin is down 21%, we want to know why, and I can click that cell. It takes me through to a product level view for margin. I can, on the second sheet, I can go back to the dashboard and click on, say, production cost. It takes me through to the same view, but now for production cost. And the way that we do that is through a formula called Threelink, which really does three things. It does a hyperlink to another part of the workbook. It displays something in the cell. That could say just click here, but in this case it's a cube value that it's retrieving. And then importantly, it passes a parameter, so it's passing B11 onto the second sheet. And then this grid, in terms of its key figure selection, is based off that cell. So everything interlinks tightly, and it's really a formula-driven process that business users understand and can get to grips with very quickly. And it gives them scope to build the type of reports that they really just can't build, certainly in native Excel, or in reality in most other bespoke BI tools as well, all with relatively little training time. So let's then think about publication and distribution and move on to some of the governance side of things. If we take this report, I as a user have built this report and I want to share it across the organization. I could do it in Excel, but a better way to do that really is going to be to publish it to XLCubed Web. So I'd make a connection to the web server, and I'll come back to this folder structure in a second, but I choose a folder and I'll go ahead and publish the report. And what's happening at publication time is that we're publishing the structure of the report, but not the data. And it's being published to a SQL Server database, which can be security controlled and permissioned exactly as you require. And once that's published, we can then switch across to XLCubed Web and take a look at the report. And first of all, the homepage environment is really a series of folders available down the left-hand side. The same folders we were looking at within the Excel edition. And then over to the right, we've got bookmarked reports or else previously opened reports. You can change the view accordingly. The folder structure, as I say, we'll come back to talking about that in a little bit, but the other thing to mention at this point is that lots of our customers use XLCubed Web within custom portals, or indeed within SharePoint. Within SharePoint, very easy setup. Within custom portals, you can either access the reports individually through a URL, put them in an iframe, or there's a full JavaScript API, which allows you to embed any aspect of XLCubed Web within that environment. So if I then open the webinar folder that we published into and open the management book example, and the idea clearly here is that what you see in Excel, is exactly what you're going to see on the web-based environment. So the interactivity is the same in the web as you had in Excel. The report types can vary enormously from Stephen Few style dashboards like this one, multi-sheet content, of course, as well there, down to more standardized financial reporting, and also standard dashboards where the interrelated object, where I click one item, everything else updates in sync. And potentially with these, if you're displaying it on mobile, the report will resize and reshape indeed so that it's going to display nicely on a mobile device. So you can go for the fully responsive environment as well. In terms of what can and cannot be published to XLCubed Web, really any XLCubed functionality clearly is going to publish to the web version. And that includes the additional data visualization types that we provide. So things like tree maps, which we have here, geospatial maps, and also small multiples or trellis charts. So in this example, if I'm interested in Canada, I can first of all click to highlight it, the table below updates, same for United States. Or if I want to understand in more detail what's going on in Canada, I can double click to drill down to the next level of data, and I can do the same for Ontario. So all the XLCubed functionality will publish, and in terms of native Excel, standard Excel formulae, standard Excel charts are all going to publish to XLCubed Web without issue. The only thing that doesn't really is a pivot table, and we don't really care about that because you can do everything and more through XLCubed grids. So let's then think about the governance and the control aspects around XLCubed Web. And while there's a console to manage all that, true to our roots and our Excel-centric nature, if you're an admin user, you can do much of it from the Excel environment. So when I come into this publication dialog, if I clicked on a folder, so we take the webinar one as an example, and manage that, I can check the permissions, just my laptop, so there's not too many, but I can also add new users or new Active Directory groups into that. I can then, if I look at a specific report, so if I go to the one that I know has been published a few times, in here, when I look at the history, I can see how many times the report has been published, what the changes were, and I can also say there's a problem with the most recent version. I can choose to revert to a prior version and move it back to an earlier release. At this level too, I can add folders and maintain folders and rename folders. So you've got a good degree of control of the whole environment there. What we also do in XLCubed Web is once a user logs in or once a report has been opened, we log all that information. So that gives us the ability to do operational reporting. So not reporting directly on the business, but reporting on the operation of the system itself. So we have a starter for 10 dashboard, if you like, And if I look at the reports, I can see which reports have been run most frequently during the selected period. And I can also look at the reports which are taking longer than we'd like to run and which reports are unused. And if they haven't been used for a year, they're probably good candidates for tidy up and removal. So that's the brief run through XLCubed Web. The next element I wanted to touch on really is the commentary and collaboration side of things, which is an element really often missing from BI solutions. And collaboration and knowledge sharing in general in reporting is getting a lot of an analyst focus at the moment. Let's take a look at how we handle it in XLCubed. So, and again, this is fully governed. I'm not going to go through the security side of it, but you can determine who can comment, who cannot comment, who can read comments very granularly. So in this example, you can see we're looking at April. There's a comment on discount. Let's change the month to May. And we now have no comment on discount, but we've got a comment on margin. So I did that just to show you that the commentary is not an Excel comment. It's something that's genuinely tied to the data. And again, we're actually storing it in SQL Server. When I hover over this one, I can see there's a few comments actually have happened. And if we look at the history, Jan's made a comment about margins. They've dropped off significantly from the previous period. Chris has looked at the root cause, and Nirja is mentioning that we're in discussion looking to resolve this fairly soon. So in that example, it's really a case where someone has identified a potential issue with a number and raised a question, and it's a discussion thread where there's been additional information passed through. Another scenario where this approach is useful is at a slightly higher level of data. So if I change to December, you can see that we've got a comment appears here, not on a specific data point, but within the context of the whole report. And it's actually just tied to the month of December, and it's really a caution. It's basically saying that be careful about using the figures like for like last year because we've changed the store mixture in the meantime. It's really a warning and helping people to read not just the number, but to understand a little bit about what's going on behind the number, which is extremely valuable in itself. Now, the last use case, or the last one I'll show, there are lots of others, is the situation where we've got some sort of short-term issue. And if a number is significantly off what people expect, if you've got a few thousand users, that's going to lead to a lot of support calls. So what you can do to stop that situation is explain it at source. So if the revenue number is low, maybe there's a POS failure. If we're a retail outlet, maybe there's a POS failure at our biggest store. So no data since 2nd of November, something like that. I've made the comment. Great, it shows up in Excel. Where it's actually really going to be useful is on the web side of things, where you've got hundreds, potentially thousands of users who are accessing that report. So when they bring up the November data, I've got a comment here. The number doesn't look right, but I can see exactly what's going on, and I can understand why the number is so much off what I expected it to be. And when that data feed issue, the POS feed issue, gets resolved, we can either make a new comment or we can simply delete the comment. And clearly, I can only delete the comment because I'm an admin level user and I've got permissions to do that. So let's just remove it. The comment has gone from the web. And when we go back into Excel, switch the month and switch back again, it's going to be gone from Excel too. Okay, so yeah, I've slightly overshot my allocated time, but as I mentioned, it's a brief walkthrough really of XLCubed, and hopefully what I've managed to show just now is that it's essentially an Excel-centric platform which gives users lots of smarts and lots of ways to work more intelligently and quicker in Excel itself, but that also offers a governed and highly scalable web deployment mechanism through XLCubed Web. So, Jem, if I pass back to you at this point.
Gary, were you going to mention your partner model?
Sure. So XLCubed, as Jen mentioned, we're a relatively niche vendor, and we operate primarily through a partner channel. Our partner network is made up primarily on a regional split, and we have various different types of partner, some of which you can see on the screen at the moment. So again, these guys are regionally split with it across Germany, Switzerland, Denmark, UK, and then we also have some OEM partners who embed XLCubed much more deeply within the software, and they really sell a solution rather than a individual bespoke BI implementation each time. So people like FIS, Tagetik, Avados, CPM for Care, they're really embedding XLCubed within that model. For the top four, they're essentially BI consultancies, and there are obviously, I think we've got about 35, somewhere between 35 and 40 partners actively working with us at the moment. And we work very closely with these guys, and we take on board their input, and really that feeds into future product direction. So the whole partner channel is very key for us. We work closely with our bigger customers as well, but the partner model is very, very key for us. So as I mentioned, we actually have three flavors within our partner model, which is fairly standard, I think, in the industry. We have VARs. These are really people who are delivering end-to-end BI solutions, and the BI solution may vary significantly from one customer to another. But we're really looking there for expertise in the underlying technology, and the opportunities, I think, for the partners are to really differentiate your BI offer. So, lots of Microsoft BI partners, if everyone's using the same core tools, it becomes in some ways difficult to differentiate unless you've previously delivered at the customer, previously delivered something very successful at the customer. So having something additional in the tool set, which is not just Power BI, it can be an instead of Power BI, or it can be alongside of Power BI. Many of our customers use XLCubed on top of Power BI, certainly. It can really differentiate your solution and help you deliver faster end-to-end solutions and more value for the customer. Implementation partners are really similar to VARs, except they don't have the ability to resell the software as well. And then lastly, OEM partners. As I mentioned, that's where XLCubed is included as a component in an overall solution. So we have OEM partners operating within banking, providing different banking solutions, providing corporate performance management solutions, providing solutions for healthcare, solutions for pharma, across the piece. And in many of those cases, XLCubed is actually going out as a branded environment, so it's partner branded. It's not showing as XLCubed, it's showing as partner name analytics, for example. So both the XL add-in and the XLCubed web can integrate tightly within other solutions. And if you want to introduce a new product which has got your company name on it as a partner, then that's certainly something that's easily achievable. So there is a case study which is available on our website for a partner, CPM for Care, in the Netherlands, who joined us about 18 months ago. And there's a great quote there from Marcel Brockhoff, one of the co-owners at CPM for Care. They took an extensive look across most of the Magic Quadrant vendors, and while they certainly liked some elements about what some of those products provided, they found that there's inherent complexity, and they were able to get up and running much more quickly with XLCubed. And not just them in terms of delivering a solution to their customers, but also the customers themselves, because once you first deliver to the customers, you may provide some starter point reports and dashboards. They want to be able to self-serve at the end of the day, and the training requirement on XLCubed is significantly lower than on most other products, and that's really because we're we're extending and leveraging existing Excel skills. CPM for Care actually converted an existing BI solution they had across to the Microsoft stack and across to XLCubed, and they found the process overall to be, I think, pleasantly straightforward, is a good way to put it. So they've been able to really accelerate the crossover of their customers from the legacy solution across to the new XLCubed Microsoft solution fairly significantly faster than they first expected, and with a lot less pain along the way. And we've enjoyed working with those guys. I think they've enjoyed working with us, and it's a familiar story across many of our partners. So, for more information on our partner channel, please contact us. We're very happy to discuss that and to explain how it works in a little bit more detail. So maybe if I let you wrap up, Jen, and then we can go on to any questions.
Sure, that sounds great. So essentially, just doing an overview of this session, we talked about XLCubed. It is a unique solution for governed Excel reporting in the enterprise. Hopefully you saw some of those cool and unique features when Gary was doing his demo. It is Excel centric, so the Excel fans out there, it's certainly something that they'll embrace and enjoy and be immediately productive. It does fill gaps in the Microsoft offerings, and that is the beauty of working in the Microsoft system or using Microsoft technologies, is the partner ecosystem that does have all these additional enhancements and whatnot. The other piece, and it's really hard to, you can write something, but until you experience it, it's really working with a smaller company that truly cares and ensures your success. You're not just a number, and you experience that when you start working with some of these smaller partner vendors in the ecosystem. There are a plethora of wonderful resources. Wrote a white paper on this topic for my partners out there, or the implementers out there, and even some of the larger organizations that might be interested in governing Excel. There's resources here for partner programs, some additional training. The YouTube libraries are quite nice as well. If you didn't see all the demos that you would like, there's certainly more in there. And now we'll take a few questions.
Okay, so my colleague is passing me across a few questions that have come in during the session. The first was, do we use Silverlight? We don't use Silverlight. I think the real question is probably, is there any client-side requirement? And essentially there isn't for XLCubed Web. So you need a browser, and that's really it. There's no other client-side requirements other than the requisite security. Someone's asked about licensing. So in terms of licensing, if you drop us a email to the info@XLCubed, we can certainly provide you that. But basically, it's licensed in two ways. The XL edition is named user. So if you've got 100 users, you need 100. If you've got 10, you need 10. The web server is licensed concurrently. So you may find that for 500 actual users, you may need around 100 concurrent, maybe 200 concurrent, something like that. The concurrency varies a lot, but it is enforced. We don't charge by core or by CPU or anything like that. And if you're a multinational organization operating in Japan, the UK, and the US, then concurrency works out very, very well for you, as a couple of our customers find. Okay, so someone's asking just about the difference between so with analysis services, there's multidimensional and there's tabular. Someone's asking if we query tabular through MDX, but by default we do, but we do also have an object, a table object, which queries through DAX, and that can, in some cases, give a fairly big performance gain. John is asking about Microsoft's positioning in Power BI, and it must be a problem for us in the market. To be honest, not really. It's actually working out quite well, because I think it actually helps cement our niche, if you like. The fact that we're Excel-centric is clearly quite different to the Power BI model. And while Power BI is good at certain things, it's not really a financial reporting tool. And there are limitations in terms of complexity of the type of report that you're able to build there. So in honesty, that's actually working out quite well for us, and I think it's giving a bigger problem for some of the other vendors who've got their own bespoke solutions. A bit more of a specific one now from Cindy. So just asking about a problem that you hit with pivot tables when one pivot table grows and it tries to overwrite another one, and you get into a loop of error messages. Yeah, you can handle that in XLCubed. The grids can push each other up and down, essentially. Or you can also embed a grid within what we call a viewport, which gives you a scrollable area within Excel. So the area doesn't change, but you can scroll up and down. So someone's asking if we can show the mashups feature. Yes and no. Yes, we can, but not in this time frame. So if that's something that you're interested in seeing, we can absolutely line up a session to walk you through that. But it's a 3 or 4 minute demo probably, and it didn't really fit in the time scale today. Okay, in terms of the web server that's needed, it runs on Microsoft IIS. In terms of SQL version, there's no limitations around the version of SQL Server or really analysis services. And you don't need analysis services with XLCubed from version 9 onwards, although it's still the sweet spot. In terms of Microsoft Office, it works with anything from Office 2007 up to the current versions of 365. So I mean, that seems to be it in terms of questions. So with that, I'd just like to say, first of all, thanks for everyone who attended. I hope it's been interesting for you. For more information about XLCubed, and we're happy to talk, obviously, please contact us at info@xlcubed.com. And then lastly, I'd like to say thanks very much for Jen for presenting today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, everyone. Any outstanding questions, please just email them to info@xlcubed. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a good day, and goodbye.